So, you may be looking at the title and you might be a bit confused. About a year ago, I decided that I should start reading actual books. One of the books I found is called The Only Rule Is It Has to Work, by writers and co-hosts of the Effectively Wild podcast, Ben Lindbergh and Sam Miller. Now, you may have realized that I said I bought this book about a year ago. Yeah, it took me about 10 months for me to start reading it. Apparently, my attention span only allows me to binge watch YouTube videos. Regardless, I read the book, and I highly recommend it to any baseball fan. The basic premise of the book is that Sam and Ben wanted to apply sabermetric ideas to construct and run a baseball team. Their ideas took them to the Pacific Association, a lower-ranking league of independent professional baseball, where they took over the Sonoma Stompers. With little money at their disposal, they set upon their quest for baseball supremacy using nothing but sabermetrics. This video is essentially a summary of the book, but I'm mainly looking at the methods that they used and what their results were. I'm not really going to talk about actual storylines, only if they are essential to the context of the statistics. It wouldn't be fair to spoil everything about the book, so go check out the book if you want to learn more about the storylines. Now, let's take a dive into the Sonoma Stompers' descent into sabermetric thinking, or what I like to call extreme Moneyball. Now, I think it's important to understand the context of some of the main characters involved. In the prologue, we are introduced to Paul Hvozdovic, a starting pitcher who in April 2015 was trying out for the River City Rascals of the Frontier League. He had done pretty well in his scrimmages, however in his final scrimmage, he gave up a home run. He would be cut by a text from the manager. A player in the prime of his career, who was cut by a team 9 levels below the majors, had now gotten an opportunity from a team 2,000 miles away. He would be taking a pay cut from $600 to $500. Paul also feared that his girlfriend would break up with him, as he had spent the last few summers circling around the independent baseball world. He packed his bags and went to Sonoma. Sam and Ben knew Paul as a name on a spreadsheet. No video, no radar statistics, no prior interviews, nothing. But he went 11-1 with a 1.80 ERA for a Division II college team as a senior. I think this story speaks volumes about the baseball world, but Paul is living in a much different area of that world compared to Sam and Ben. Paul was worried about his time in baseball coming to an end. At the same time, Sam and Ben were thinking about the lack of sabermetric usage in baseball. They were thinking, why don't teams try 2-man outfields and 5-man infields against extreme ground ball and fly ball hitters? Why don't they deploy their best relievers at the most important times, instead of wasting them in low leverage situations where they're likely to record a save? That's what Sam and Ben were thinking about. Like I said, they were living in different ends of the baseball world. Sam and Ben were trying to run a crazy experiment, while Paul was trying to chase an unlikely dream. Now that we understand the underlying context of this experiment, let's talk about the team. Sam and Ben were given the chance to run the baseball operations of the Sonoma Stompers. The Stompers are part of a 4-team league known as the Pacific Association. This league is 9 levels below the majors. Sonoma is a town of around 11,000 people near the Bay Area in California. However, this town is really close-knit. Every season, players actually live with local residents, known as host families. It's like this every single season. Now onto the actual team. Rosters are comprised of 22 players. The Stompers only have 3 players from the previous season that will be returning. However, they find a veteran player named Felland Lentini, who they call Faye. He becomes the Stompers' player manager. Later on, they attend the league-wide player tryouts and draft. 2 noteworthy tidbits. Sam and Ben found a player that was built like David Ortiz, but was deceptively athletic. No one but these guys noticed him. Long story short, they essentially tampered their way to drafting him. Also, the Stompers traded 6 donuts for a 3rd-round pick, particularly 3 maple, 2 chocolate, and 1 glazed. No, I'm not kidding. Personally, I think that trade is unfair. I would ask for at least 3 glazed donuts in return. 3rd-round picks are valuable. In the end, the guys assemble their team. You may notice that there has been no sabermetrics so far. Enter the spreadsheet. What set Ben and Sam apart from the rest of the league was that they had statistical knowledge that they could apply so they could search for wrongly released players using the previous season's stats. All of these stats compiled into a spreadsheet. These are known as the spreadsheet players. An interesting quote stuck out to me. 99.9% of the talent is sucked away in the draft. That remaining 0.1% could be the key to the Stompers season. The spreadsheet had everything from adjusted on-base percentage to catcher's framing. A lot of the spreadsheet guys don't sign for their own personal reasons, but they did sign these players. Here's what the opening day roster looks like. Pause the video if you want to look them over. Now, here's how Sam and Ben predicted their players would finish by the end of the season. What did Sam and Ben have at their disposal that no other team in independent baseball had? They had Pitch FX at their home park. These are cameras that will track pitches to record the break, velocity, location, speed off the bat, the angle, the trajectory, and a lot more. But that's not all they had at their disposal. They also had Hit FX, which provides measurements of batted ball trajectory, and Command FX, which provides measurements of pitch accuracy. They were also given access to BATS, or Baseball Analysis and Tracking System, which allows the user to import video and to set timestamps for each pitch, tag its type and location, and to mark the outcome of each at-bat. All of these assets are new for this level of baseball. Statistics are not a certainty. Spreadsheets are not a certainty. Sam and Ben understood that. The more we learn about baseball, the better we understand how misguided any sense of certainty is. You can have all of the stats and predictions in the world, but only the players know what it's like to stand in that batter's box. You can show them all of the adjustments they need to make, but that can fly out the window in an instant. Baseball can't be perfectly predicted. The goal for Sam and Ben was to find a balance between these two clashing ways of thinking. Let's see if they accomplished that goal. The Stompers won on opening day thanks to a go-ahead home run by one of their spreadsheet guys, Kristen Gayday. Their first use of the shift on a pull hitter didn't work as the batter bunted, but for the rest of the game, that same batter grounded into the shift. Through the team's first 6 games, they went 6-0, which was actually the first perfect week in franchise history. Here are the stats from those games. Notice how large the gap is in the 4 right columns. The WRC plus difference is very telling. Now let's look at the pitching stats through the first 6 games. The noticeable differences are in ERA and average. In short, the Stompers were the best team in the league for the first 6 games. Interestingly, during the next weekend, Jose Canseco was part of the team for 2 games. Yes, the Jose Canseco. 50-year-old Jose Canseco. Here are his stats from those 2 games. Not great, but it could have been worse. Later on, the MLB draft happened. This is where the spreadsheet comes into play. Like I said earlier, 99.9% of the talent is scooped up in the draft. Sam and Ben are looking for that 0.1%. Here are a few names and stats from that spreadsheet. The player that they end up signing is Taylor Eads. However, not for a few more weeks. The Stompers have started the season 11-2. Here's what their pitching stats look like. Look at the huge gap in runs allowed. Some of this can be attributed to Sean Conroy, who was one of the league's best pitchers at the time. While he was mainly placed in the bullpen, the guys wanted him to start. He was given the opportunity during a game on Pride Night. Conroy came out as gay a few days earlier, the first professional baseball player to do so in history. He ended up pitching a complete game during his start on Pride Night. The scorecard from this game is now in Cooperstown. Here's a funny quote from the book. "Our small team has a chance to help a player make history, thanks to a spreadsheet that discriminates based only on stats." The Stompers would lose a few games because of old school bullpen management from their manager Faye. In one game in particular, the Stompers lost a game because Faye didn't bring in their best reliever, Sean Conroy, because he's a closer. In Faye's mind, the closer is out there to get the save. That's it. Later in the season, Faye is fired after many more disagreements that will take too long to talk about. He is replaced by a new guy named Yoshi. Heading towards the end of the first half of the season, the Stompers are 20-10 with a 3-game lead and 9 games before the first half ends. By the way the championship game works, if you are at the top of the first half standings, you have locked your place into the championship game. So if the Stompers stay in first place, they are going to the championship game. Here are the average ages and the percentage of first-year players per team. The Stompers are the youngest team in the league, and 1/3 of their players are playing their first professional season. Another player the team signed was Santos Saldivar, a pitcher entering his first professional season. He was on the same college team as pitcher Jose De Leon. Here's how they compared stats-wise during their last season. De Leon was a junior and Saldivar was a senior. While De Leon was drafted in the 24th round of the 2013 draft and became a top 30 prospect, Saldivar left college after his senior season in 2015 without being drafted, and went to play for Sonoma. Baseball is unfair. Sam and Ben give the new manager Yoshi some stats that show that pitchers do worse as they go through the lineup 2 or 3 times. They recognize that some pitchers just want the W in their win column, so they don't want to be taken out before completing 5 innings. But at the same time, this traditional thinking is hindering potential team success. That illustrates the argument between traditional and sabermetric thinking. There was a system that Ben and Sam wanted to implement that I had never heard of. A system of calling pitches from the dugout using a computerized random number generator. So the selection of pitches is truly random, and the batter can't pick up on patterns from certain pitchers. However, it would be very difficult to set up. They would have to figure out how often to throw each pitch for each pitcher in each game, and how to relay that call to the catcher and or the pitcher in just a few seconds, and how to convince the pitcher to throw a pitch that he doesn't want to throw. They also had other ideas such as using arm fatigue metrics to make pitching changes. Overall, it would be too much to implement. It's almost the end of the first half of the season, and the team decides to use a 5-man infield for the first time. Something you rarely see, even in the majors. It turns out to be a success as the player that they used it on had trouble adjusting to it. The Stompers would go on to win the first half of the season, clinching their place into the championship game. Unfortunately, many of their key players would not be there to take part later in the season. Teams in leagues above the Pacific Association poach talent throughout the season, so the league loses a few players because of that. Also, because this is a summer league, some of these players are only playing for a portion of the summer because they have to go back to their normal lives, whether it be school or some other commitment. Many players that were on the team at the end of the first half of the season were not there in the championship game. This hurt the team's second half performance, which I'll get into in a minute. There's actually something that Ben and Sam overlooked about the landscape of the league that they are in. Their opponents severely lack left-handed hitters. Look at these comparisons. The league was essentially experiencing a lefty shortage. At this point in the season, the Stompers' left-handed pitchers had entered a slump. This was a major reason why. Furthermore, the Stompers performed much more poorly as a team in the second half of the season compared to their first half. They actually lost 2 of their last 3 games of the season, which lost them home field advantage for the championship game. Here's how the league compares stats-wise between their first and second halves of the season. San Rafael is the only team with massive improvements. Sonoma was the team that disappointed the most. Looking at Sonoma individually, particularly with runners in scoring position, you can see that in the second half of the season, Sonoma's pitchers are giving up more hits with runners in scoring position, while Sonoma's hitters are not driving in their own base runners. Now we are at the championship game. Ben and Sam actually did some sneaky business and got the best pitcher in the league, Max Beatty, signed by the Wichita Wingnuts of the American Association. He would actually be released from his new team after one ineffective start, but he couldn't play for San Rafael because rejoining the team is against league rules. Baseball is unfair. They also indirectly got Matt Chavez, the best hitter for the San Rafael Pacifics, signed by the San Diego Padres, where he did not perform up to standard in high A ball. Now, San Rafael are without 2 of their best players in the championship game. Let's fast forward to the top of the 8th inning. The Stompers are down by 2 runs. One of the best hitters for the Stompers, Mark Hurley, is up to the plate with 2 runners on base. The manager of the Pacifics decides to bring in a left-handed pitcher, Chris Lovejoy, to face the right-handed Hurley. Here are the WRC splits for Hurley, and here are the weighted on-base average splits for Lovejoy. This is one of the worst managerial decisions you can make. Howard would single and bring in a run. Now comes in Andrew Parker, a guy who is much better against lefties than righties. You would think that the manager would bring in a right-handed pitcher, but traditional baseball thinking causes the Pacific's right-handed closer, Guadalupe Barrera, to continue warming up rather than come in. Why? Because he's the closer, and he only pitches in the 9th inning. What did Parker do? He belted a ball over the fence for a 3-run home run. Now the Stompers are up by 2 runs. Except it had actually bounced over the wall, so it was a ground rule double and the game was tied. Let's go to the bottom of the 9th with Sean Conroy pitching, who is actually very efficient with runners on base. Conroy used to be the closer, but now he's in the Sabermetric friendly fireman role, or if you play out of the park baseball, the stopper role. Well, despite all the stats in the Stompers' favor, Conroy gives up a walk-off single and San Rafael are champions. Baseball is unfair. Was this experiment a failure? No, it wasn't, because baseball is a game of failure. In fact, Ben and Sam's experiment was the reason why 2 of the best pitchers on the Stompers, Santos Saldivar and Dylan Stoops, were signed by major league teams, the Brewers and Padres respectively. These teams used the pitch FX data that was gathered, technology that no other independent team had access to. But at the same time, data can only get you so far, as seen with many moments throughout the season. People can read the same data and come to 2 different opinions. The projections from opening day by Sam and Ben weren't the most accurate. The spreadsheet pitchers were solid, while the spreadsheet hitters didn't fulfill their promise. While the Sonoma Stompers didn't win at all, they became a symbol for progress in baseball. Of course, we saw that with Sabermetrics, but along with Sean Conroy's story, the 2016 Stompers became the first professional team to have multiple female players on the roster, while en route to the franchise's first championship. All in all, the goal of the experiment may not have been met, but it progressed the sport more than Sam and Ben could have ever imagined. In the words of baseball's forward thinker Brad Pitt, how can you not be romantic about baseball? Check out the book in the description if you want to learn more, because I can assure you guys I did not go over everything. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.